Okay.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. And I've got a very exciting guest here. I see a few of you waiting inside there. Now there is a small bit of a lag because we're doing our interview via Zoom, which means that anything coming up on YouTube, it's about 30-40 seconds afterwards. So bear with me while if I don't see the questions immediately. But if you've any questions, just pop them all up as we're going through. We've got a very exciting guest here today. We have Chris from Donegal Yarns, and I'm going to get your last name right. Weiniger, is that how you pronounce it?
Well done, Carol.
I'm afraid to say it because I'm really bad with names and pronunciations.
Well, it's okay. Look, I think we've known each other long enough that I wouldn't be insulted anyway.
It's like, how often do I use your last name? It's almost always just Chris.
Yeah. Well,
Does anyone...
it is quite an unusual name for an Irish person, but
it's
yeah.
True. It's true. Anyone wondering where the accent is from? Chris has got a very Northern Irish accent there, so it sounds really different from me. And we're so happy to have him here. I've known him for many, many, many years, and he's the managing director of Donegal Yarns. And I might pass it over for a few minutes so he can introduce himself and let you all know what he does.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in this world. I can't see from how many people, how many guests are. Yeah, Carol, thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to have been invited to come and speak and just talk a little bit about the projects that Carol and I have been working on. Donegal Yarns, we're one of the last few remaining mills in Ireland. There's a few small mini mills, not undermining them in any way, but in terms of as a commercial business, exporting product worldwide, would be probably one of the last remaining sort of fully commercial spinning mills. We're vertical, meaning we take the raw wool from the clean raw wool from that state right through a dyeing process through to the finished yarn. Some of the other smaller spinning mills, they're vertical insofar as that they have some small weaving operations. So I've been 18 years as managing, I'm not saying managing director, as general manager.
General managers.
They don't pay me enough money, Carol, yet to call me a managing director or CEO.
I've just given you a promotion, Chris.
Well, thank you. Well, you're very close to my managing director down there in Cork. You can have a little word with him. But yeah, look, we're very proud that the industry was in quite a difficult position back in the sort of the early 2000s, and thankfully some investors had the foresight to take the company on from being a state-owned company, which was successful for a number of years until a mass exodus of foreign overseas manufacturing. But four investors who have all been involved in the industry came in. I was approached to come up to Donegal after I'd be third, fourth generation of textiles in my family, and it's been just an absolutely wonderful journey from being involved in sort of a commodity manufacturing as in knitwear production to this sort of, we always talk about it as a cottage industry to see the successes. And the success is placing a value on the fiber, but more importantly for me, it's the relationships with the customer. And that extends further than just yourself or a weaving company. It's the wider community. And I would say the hand knitting fraternity is probably the most pleasurable for me to work with.
Well, we're so hands-on. So like we got in our hands, we've got very strong views on what we do and don't like to knit with.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I say, that there's beautiful fiber all around the world. We've done a lot of exploratory work on fibres. As you know, both of us, Carol, have been involved in the sort of the Irish Grown Wool Council and hopefully trying to develop that. But for us, yes, there's certain things that natural fibres cannot do in textiles, but it is a wonderful biodegradable product.
Yeah.
Mix it with sorry.
It is all natural fibres you spin there. Like I don't to the best of
yeah, 100%. We have everything is 100% noble fibres, that being natural, from ranging from the coarser wools, the microns, which is more the mountain breeds, right down to the fine merinos. And we also incorporate blends, including kid mohair, cashmere, alpaca, silk. And we're actually doing some continued research and development into bast fibres,
What's
which
that?
well, we're looking at sort of plant-based products.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm not going to give too much away because
You've got me really curious now.
well, I always like sowing a seed and just putting, so it's that's another very important part, because the it's like your business, Carol. You've got to always, look, we have a beautiful range of colors, as ranging, quite a big collection,
Yeah.
all the way, and you're working with different designers. You've always got to think of something new as
And keep
well.
moving forward. It's actually, talking about the different fibres, there was a question came in from someone, and she said, you've got such a myriad of fibres. How do you decide? So I'll throw that over to you. Is that, like, what I'd be kind of curious about in relation to that is how much of it is like the softness and the knitability or the wearability versus the cost, and how do you balance those out? Is there kind of or do you have a
Well,
range?
I suppose there's three main metrics for fiber for wool. It's the micron, which is the diameter of the fiber. So the higher the micron, the thicker the fiber, which reflects in the handle and the coarseness of it. So you would have the fiber diameter, the micron, then color. There's different grades of the color of the wool, which, because that impacts the dyeing.
Yeah.
So if you're using a sort of an off, a sort of an off creamy colored, it's you're not going to get a vibrant sort of really nice bright color. It could be quite dull.
Yeah.
And then another measurement is the staple fiber length. So part of it, depending of its application, be it a weaving, machine knitting, or going into upholstery, we don't the twist that you put into the yarn affects not just the handle, but also the strength of it. So there's three main metrics.
And when you say handle, you mean what it feels like to actually work with, and what the fabric it creates looks like after the fact.
Yes, yeah. So it's, I suppose, the established ranges that we have. It's been years of experience and working with the customer to understand. A Donegal, by its nature, is a rough, uneven, with those real distinct flecks that show in the yarn. So it's, with commercial knitting, the balance between keeping our unique selling point, which is our strong character, and the balance of a workable product for the consumer. It's quite a fine line, and I think educating I mean, there's no better person like a teacher like you, Carol, to teaching people to know how to work with it. You place a value in a product, and then, but you have to be sympathetic to it as well in design.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose I'm going to take you back to a couple of years ago when we started dropping it here, the Blasta yarn range. So you came to me with this saying, because you had been for a few years trying to develop Irish fleeces, Irish yarns, and get to a place where you had as much of the fleece was Irish as possible, but that it was still a really usable yarn. And you were really excited when you came, saying, okay, I think you're going to really like this one. So this Blasta, which we've done, it's a variation on another yarn they've got, which is their Irish Heather range, which is 60% Irish fleece and 40% New Zealand. But I know that came about from another project. If you want to tell people a little bit about the original project for that, and where it originated from.
Yeah, so it really dates back maybe 10 or 11 years ago, and it was a question that I asked myself, because from transitioning from sort of synthetic man-made fibers into the wonderful world of wool, I asked the question, why are we not using a natural resource here? And already the word sustainability is kicked around by many people, and we felt, look, can we engage? We had to get some feedback from our customers. And there's this assumption, because already we saw major brands requesting the origin of the wool. So when you were selling the yarn, you had to specify the origin. So we have like product specifications. So it was a journey that we started out, went, and we know there's these beautiful green fields in Ireland. You've got this little fluffy sheep going about but when you actually delve into the inside of it, the quality of the wool wasn't good enough. So we said, look, how do we manage and start to improve the wool? It's a combination of breeding and then the care that the farmers, and it was something that we wanted to say, well, look, we're very proud of our heritage and provenance. Like in every country has got lots of history as well. And we wanted to say, so we worked with a group of farmers and talked to them and said, we will reward you in terms of remuneration but we need the wool presented, care, at the time of shearing. So it's just developed from that. And I looked at sort of other models of other countries and realized, look, 100% Irish wool was going to be just that little bit too extreme in terms of its application for hand knitting and say knitted garments, where more so it was more lent for a carpet yarn or upholstery fabrics, which really good strength. So it developed, and we decided, look, let's look at, say, the British Wool Marketing Board, and they created a British wool blend. And we decided, look, we'll be very transparent, say 60%. So there's a lot of grading to get that best wool in Ireland. And that's part of the council, is that it's never going to replace merino, but what we're trying to do is look at the whole carbon footprint or life cycle analysis and try and support a local indigenous industry, farming, and seek farmers, and our carbon footprint. So very in simple terms, 40%, we've reduced 60% of movement of wool from the other side of from New Zealand to Ireland, and supporting industry as well.
Yeah, and what a lot of people may not realize is in Ireland, because we're quite a small country, the start of the you have the fleece created here, sheared, but we have no scouring facility, so it's still getting shipped across for scouring and then comes back to actually be. Does that make it trickier to kind of maintain specific breeds and things like that? So like, I know we have the Galway wool, which is breed specific, and that is actually kept as a single clip. With Blasta, because you're looking for the actual quality or the grading, I'm assuming there's no move towards more breed specific with that, because it's the quality rather than specific breeds you're looking at.
Well, what we're doing, particularly the Blasta, we're using more so the sort of the lamb's wool. And when you say lamb's wool, that would be up to maybe the growth of up to, say, 12 months of the animal.
The
shearing. In an industry like in Australia, they can be shearing twice a year, so they're getting two clips, a bite of the cherry twice, really. But the lamb's wool, the breed specific is important, because it's sort of the farmers are growing it for dual purpose. But if the remuneration is significant enough, they can start breeding more for the wool, like they would have done hundreds of years. The wool was of more value than the actual animal for the meat. So we are looking and talking with. There's a number of breeds that you've got: the blue-faced Leicester, Romley. We've got you've got Suffolks, Texels, and quite a bit. The Romley is actually very good. So that is our hopefully it takes time. It does.
And I'm assuming then, like, part of it is what breeds do well in Ireland, because we do have a specific climate. I assume most of the breeds that work well in the UK are going to transfer over here fairly easily. Would it be pretty similar? Because the climate's not that different.
Yeah, I mean, recently I'm constantly in communication with the wool merchants based in Bradford, and this is the main hub for where Irish wool is actually traded, or yes, some of the merchants are trading directly for the carpet industry, but there's also that relationship in the UK. And I've seen like the Romley, we've recently been able to buy quite a significant amount of British wool, Romley wool, which is able to replace another New Zealand product that we've been buying. And that's again just
keeping it all closer to home.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions popping up here. Joy was asked, well, she said, first of all, Blasta is a fantastic wool. And then she was asking if the color line will be expanded. Now, what we did kind of slightly differently here for the Knit Stars was this is a yarn color that we did produce with Donegal, but that is specific to us. Donegal themselves have a range of colors, so I can actually throw that to you. Just in your general range, is there any appetite in your end to expand the range, or is it just going to be for specific customers if people are looking for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I held this shade card up. That's one card.
Yeah.
And then we've got another card here. So
yeah, are they all
the Irish Heather? There's 21 colors at the minute.
Okay.
I would love to. It was actually a product that was losing traction, and we actually designed it. And specifically, your Blasta project was to try and revive it again. So it's a I suppose the demand versus the action dictates us expanding the range. 90 kilos is our normal for the machine setups, is our normal blend size. And we would love to be including it, but typically the minute you try, and you can't just continue to expand colors. I mean, some of the color work that we did for you, Carol, which was really, we love making color, but you have to restrict it, because it might be a color for one customer, but not suited for another. So, I mean, we're quite happy, Carol, if you want to have 6 custom colors for next year.
Ooh, so don't tempt me.
It's up to every customer of yours buying.
It is. Okay. So we have to have a poll, and you have to decide what colors you want on next. I love this color, like because I mean, the whole process that when we went in, we put a couple of color images and we threw it in, and then Nora, who works with them, basically, like, I mean, I put up a video before of the wall of fleece where she pulls the different colors and then she kind of spins it, and I get a series of these coming in. And like you see the small section and you goes like, oh, I think that'll be really nice. But when you get it, and particularly when you see it knitted up in a full piece, it's gorgeous. It's very hard to, a bit like when you paint a wall, if you put one little scrap or you see the color shade, it's very hard to picture it expanded out into a bigger and into a bigger space. But I'm really happy with this color, actually.
Great. Well, it's fun. I mean, that's what we are, color, but I think what's quite interesting about the color is, as you say, the process of making it. We might have a palette of 90 different base fleeces, but what gives some more definition to it is that we mightn't have that specific, like, rose pink that you were just showing there. So Nora has fun taking lots of reds and a bit of white, a little bit of a deep, to make that. So it's not just a solid. If you really look closely at the yarn, there's the variation, melangeness, and
she was incredible to watch when we were up there. I think it was possibly the highlight of the trip, just how excited she was, blending colors, and such a phenomenal eye to be able to pull it all together. So you have to give her a really big thank you when you're there next.
I will too. But I think it's important that the customer, like yourself, really enjoys being part. It makes you feel integrated as well, and having some scope in development.
I'm looking over here at a few questions. There's a couple of people from Offaly popping in there to say hello. Alexa is saying it's an amazing collaboration, important endeavor, and thank us for doing very important work. Kirsty is currently knitting with Blasta, and she's asking how much does it soften up after blocking? And the answer from my end, quite a bit, because it blooms and considerably, and the stitch definition changes quite a bit. So I do find that particularly if you have to wet block it, doing it just steaming, it's not going to do the job. But wet blocking, the fabric changes quite a bit when you're after the fact. Alison is trying to use British breeds when she can to support the industry because she's tired of merino. Shelley is very interested to see the development and regeneration of Irish wool. No questions though, people, you've got to put some questions. Oh, Carol is another person here has just said she's bought Knit Stars and wants to know how she gets the pinkish yarn. It's through the MDK website. They've got kits up until the 19th. So anybody who is part of Knit Stars, that yarn is available on the MDK website until the end of, until the 19th. That's their pre-order window. But all right, I'm going to go back to Chris now, now that we've kind of done the back end here. Oh, I'm looking through. I don't think there's any other questions down there that's coming up. But yeah, so we've gone and look at the different breeds, which I think is probably the most interesting, because I do think a lot of people are very interested in where things are coming from now, and how does that work from your process if you are do you think that would that develop, having more breed specific going forward? Is that tricky when it gets sent out outside the country?
I think it's as you say, like, everyone knows about merino, and it is a beautiful fiber, ranging from 17 micron up to about 25. I think you've just talked about the finishing, the breeds are really, it is important, but I think people don't know, even the farmers, and that's part of the education. What we're trying to do is understand that it is a worldwide commodity, and unfortunately, wool only represents 1% of the whole textile percentage of fiber used in textile industry. So the pricing of it, and you're competing against synthetic fibers. We want to support, the breeding and to develop the wool qualities. There are, I think there is good wool in this country, but it's the presentation of the wool by the farmers, and climate does play a part, because they did exercises in the UK where they brought merinos, which originally came from Spain, and they were breeding. One particular female farmer was breeding merinos, and over a course of 2 to 3 years, the actual characteristics of the wool changed because of the climate. But I think it's how you finish the product, knit densities. It is biodegradable, but I think rustic. I'm trying to remember the word that Rosie from McGee's used to describe the Irish wool. It's, very seldom, unless it's cashmere or extra fine, do people wear it directly against the skin.
Yeah. Because interestingly, though, I do find like the Blasta, particularly once it's been washed, and if it's not knit too tightly, like I'm wearing it next to my skin here, and I'm relatively sensitive. Like, this is a light version, because the Blasta we have here, it's double knitting, so it's 2 spun together. This one is the Blasta Light, so it's very fine. It's a little bit more delicate, but it's much lighter and more airy, the quality. But I don't know if I'm getting more used to wool next to the skin, or if it's just, when you actually wash it with a good wool wash, which is designed to soften it up, it really helps a good bit. And I think even having gone through, because the mills in Ireland, there's less processing involved. So I think you do actually need to wash stuff afterwards, because it needs to be washed at the end of the whole process before you wear it.
Carol, you're hiding one secret from your customers. That water coming from the mountains of Donegal down the rivers that we use to wash the wool before it goes, it's very. I mean, generally speaking, from process, from water, water, we're taking it directly. We can get access from the reservoir, so it's not treated, so it's actually quite soft, the water, when we're actually scouring it. But as you say, the blocking and using a proper wool soap
It helps. It definitely does
Yeah.
help. Yeah. Because there was a designer was working with it recently with me, and she normally just steam blocks. So she doesn't wash anything. She just uses steam to finish her work. And I was saying, actually, this really does well with wet blocking. So she kind of was like, okay, fine, I'll try it. So she tried it and she couldn't get over how different it looked when the finished piece, particularly when you're doing cables, how it looked with water. So I always say to people, put it in some water. It looks better. Um, I was actually, there was something I was going to say. Oh, I know, because I might touch on a small bit, the way the yarn is spun. Like when I'm talking to people about yarns, I'll often talk about woolen spun versus worsted spun. And in your mill, you've got woolen spun, which I think really lends itself to cables and anything where you want a little bit more lightness and air in the fabric. But if you could tell us a little bit about woolen spun and why you think it's good for hand knitting.
Okay. So yeah, the traditional woolen spun. I mean, looking back, go back to the original. There's two types of sort of with woolen spinning. You've got worsted and the worsted system and the woolen system. We're a woolen system carding, so that's almost pretty much going back to the historic sort of using the hand cards, teasing the fiber.
Yeah.
And the one of the advantages of the woolen system is that you're actually there's a variable, it can handle variable length of fiber.
Mm.
And when you're actually carding and teasing the wool out on the woolen system, you have them all the fibers going parallel, and then you it's called a Scots feed. You cross over the fibers, so you're layering them horizontally. So you have and then it goes through the second part of the system whereby, so you're actually interlocking the actual fiber, whereas on a worsted system, there's slightly more, if you looked at it under a microscope, sort of fibered the distance between the fibers. So you can use a variety, and that gives it better insulating properties.
Yeah, and much
And
lighter.
also the texture as well. It's going to be, it gives a little bit more texture to a woolen yarn versus a worsted.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, yes, we can ply the yarns different, single plies or two ply yarns, but I think the advantages are the ability to use different shorter fibers, and the fact that you've got better insulative properties of it, and it has a bit of character from just being a flat. It's quite bulky when it gets washed.
Yeah. And I mean, it means when you're knitting, the yardage goes very far. And what I always end up saying to people is, if you're knitting something with heavy cables, the cables tend to be very dense and they want to kind of pull the fabric down. So the woolen spun, because there is a lot of air trapped in it, kind of counteracts that a little bit. So it means that you don't get as heavy a fabric, basically.
Mm.
And because when I'm talking about this in classes, I'll often have people asking, so how can I tell which is which? I'm like, well, first of all, sometimes it's going to be listed on it, but more often it isn't. And I'll often even suggest people hold it up. Even if it's the same weight, it feels different. Like 100 grams of a worsted spun versus 100 grams of woolen spun, it doesn't feel the same. There's a bit more bounce to the woolen spun, which doesn't make any sense, but it genuinely feels quite different.
Well, again, that does come back as well to the raw fiber. They sort of would classify it as crimp, the nice sort of the loftiness of the wool. Whereas on a worsted yarn, a lot of that it's been taken out. So by the wool on a worsted system, a lot of the shorter fiber falls out. So you lose that sort of natural sort of bounciness from a fleece.
And I do love, and you were said before as well to me that it's a lot less wasteful because you're not pulling all those short fibers out. You're not producing the same amount of waste with that system either.
Yeah. So it's look, I think you've been to the mill a number of times, and we feel very strongly about sort of our character of the yarn, and really the future for us is trying to communicate sort of what we're doing, because it's more than just about a natural fiber. It's about preserving a heritage and a provenance in I was over a couple of weeks ago, a delegation, we went over to see the Harris Tweed, and you've got the Shetland Islands, and all these industries are so important for, and I think the challenge now is and it's great through social media that like sitting on a YouTube talking, how you can actually engage with a wider circle and and create almost like a network, a family of people. I mean, I don't know how many followers you have now, Carol, but
there's a good few.
Yeah.
Because we sometimes undervalue what's right in our own backyard, and actually just to be able to stand up and say, this wool is lovely to work with. It's important. It's part of who we are. Don't let it die. Build it up and make it like an integral part of our heritage and us again, I think is really important. So thank you so much for doing that. And, your support all the way along the way, because anyone who's on here, like Chris, has probably been the biggest supporter ever of me and of the business. Like right from the start, when I wrote Contemporary Irish Knits, I didn't know anything about yarn, didn't know very little about knitting, and he took the time and talked me through the whole thing and helped us develop the Blasta yarn range and the rest. So yeah, no, you've been an enormous help all the way through. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Carol, because it's, as I say, it's a combination of not just what we do, but what you do as a designer and the way you can market the product, because we're all a family in the craft industry, and
no one works independently.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way of, it's quite a challenging world that we live in, and it's sometimes nice to be able to sit and people have a common interest in something and talk about projects.
Yeah, I will have.
Thank you for
Thank you so much. There is one or two more questions here. One is more related to me. Someone was asking if there's a brand of wool wash I use that helps with the bloom of Irish yarn. I use any wool wash where I don't necessarily need to rinse it out. If you can get one with lanolin included, it's extra nice. Not essential, but it's a nice addition. I think Eucalyptus is one that's made either in the States or Canada that's quite nice. Someone was asking if worsted is better for lace knitting. Lace is a little different because it probably depends on the type of project. So I don't think one size fits all for lace knitting. And Julie was asking if there was a particular Irish yarn that's better for knitting socks, if woolen spun has an advantage over worsted spun. I don't think any of your yarns would be specific for sock knitting, would they, Chris?
Well, as you know, Carol, my wife's from Lithuania, and all her mother she could knit with socks. She couldn't knit a sweater. You couldn't give her a pattern, she'd knit a sweater. So any sort of the oddments we had, and she spent the whole winter. So my whole family and wider circle. So actually, the Irish heather, or even as a two-ply, but what I would recommend is actually increasing your dense stitch density a little bit, because like most socks have a synthetic fiber in it, because for pourment, obviously the pressure that's put on and holes appearing. So I think either a bit of knit structure and increased knitting tension. So the Irish heather more for an outdoor sock,
because it's going to be a heavier one, because it won't be a lightweight one. Yeah, you won't get it's not going to be very fine socks, but for heavier warm socks you could. Yeah. I've seen people add things like a filament of silk or even mohair to help with durability as well. Is another possibility.
Or a fine cotton or something, if you want it to be 100% natural.
Exactly, a plant, one of the more durable plant, or silk. I keep putting silk into plant fiber, which obviously it is not, but something that's kind of a little bit more durable. And the last thing I'm going to say before we finish up as well is, if anyone does want to try out Blasta, we have got a discount code Blasta15 until the 19th on our website as well. So you can pop in there and get hold of Blasta if you want. And I will let Chris go now. And thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time. And I'm glad you got your internet.
Hopefully we'll see you in Donegal soon.
I have no doubt.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.